Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Sorry for not doing a video last week. I was quite sick, still trying to get better from it, but we're going to go ahead and get into our action Bible. So it's going to be called, this story's going to be the yokes on Jeremiah. This is based on Jeremiah chapter 27 as well as 37 and 38. Now this says, back in Jerusalem, King Zedekiah still rules as long as he remains loyal to Nebuchadnezzar. For a few years, Zedekiah pays his tribute to Babylon. Then, in spite of Jeremiah's warnings, he begins to think about rebelling. He calls together the other foreign kings who are ruled by Babylon. What do we get from the money we pay to Babylon? He said, another man says, we get peace. He says, peace, but not freedom. Maybe the Egyptians will join us. They hate Babylon too. When Jeremiah learns that there is talk of another revolt, he puts an ox yoke on his shoulders and bursts into the king's conference uninvited. He says, what are you doing here? He said, God has raised up Babylon for a purpose. Everything on earth, including the wild animals, will serve Babylon's king. If you try to throw off the yoke of Babylon, you will be crushed like leaves underfoot. Serve under the yoke of Babylon, and you will live. Any prophet who tells you otherwise is lying. So he tells him, he warns him, it's, serve and live under this Babylon or die. That is God's message. But one of the prophets in the attendance, Hannah, doesn't appreciate Jeremiah's interruption. He says, oh, really? Because God told me exactly what to do with the yoke of Babylon. He said, break it. And he grabs it off of Jeremiah's shoulders and he snaps it against a pillar. He says, I predict that in 2 years, Babylon will be destroyed and we'll get all our temple treasures back. And Jeremiah tells me, he's like, that's great news, if only it were true. But unfortunately, you will be proven wrong. You may break a wooden yoke, but the yoke of Babylon is made of iron. God is tired of your lies in his name. You will be dead within the year. And Zedekiah knows Jeremiah is a true man of God, but he doesn't want to listen. Even when Hannah dies a few months later, Zedekiah still doesn't want to believe Jeremiah. During all of this time, Egypt has kept an anxious eye on the growing tensions in Judah. At the right moment, it sends the ambassadors to King Zedekiah. Babylon is your enemy as well as ours. Alone, neither of us can defeat them, but together we can do it. Or so they think. As Jeremiah prophesies, Babylon answers the latest revolt with a swift attack. For weeks, the soldiers of Judah fight to defend Jerusalem's walls. Where are the Egyptians? They promised they would come. Suddenly, the attack stops. The Babylonians are breaking camp. They've given up a siege. We've won. Judah is free. What does God have to say now, huh? So then they mock God. They see them seizing, and they say, oh yeah, what does God have to say now, huh? The people think they've won, but God has revealed the truth to Jeremiah. No, the Babylonians have not quit. They're gone to stop the Egyptians who were coming to help. Help us. They'll be back. How does he know so much about what the Babylonians are doing? So they think that they won. They think that they've retreated, but all in reality, they went back to defeat the enemy that is there to help them and then come back and destroy them. A few days later, Jeremiah starts on a trip to his hometown. A few miles from Jerusalem, before he gets out of the gate, soldiers stop him. You're the one who has prophesied that Babylon would conquer us. That this is all your fault. He says, what? I've only spoken God's truth. Since you don't support us in the war, you are a traitor to Judah. In spite of his innocence, Jeremiah is thrown into a prison within a few weeks. The Babylonians defeat the Egyptians and return to the gates of Jerusalem. Jeremiah's enemy brings him before the king and accuse him of being a traitor. I repeat the warning God gave me. Invaders from the north will conquer Judah. God chose the Babylonians to destroy our nations because of our sins, the sins of our people. This is the kind of talk that makes... Oh, sorry. I lost my spot. Judah, God, choose Babylon, destroy. Okay, it's this kind of talk that makes our soldiers lose courage. Put this traitor to death, or the city will fall. He's in your hands. Do what you want with him. Quickly, before the king can change his mind, Jeremiah's accuser puts him in an old empty well beneath the prison floor. Let him starve to death. The old well doesn't have water in it anymore, but it does still have mud and slime. Jeremiah gags to be trapped in such filth and wonders how long he can survive. But Abimelech, a servant in the palace, gets permission from the king to put Jeremiah in a prison yard. He says, "Thank God for your help. I would have died in that awful." So now, basically he's being kicked around. He's been thrown into a muddy, dirty, nasty hole to starve to death. Now he's being put in a prison yard, only for telling them the truth, only for warning them. As the siege continues, people in Jerusalem are starving and beg for food. At last, the frightened king calls for Jeremiah. What will happen to us? It's simple. If you surrender, Jerusalem will be saved. If you don't, it will be burned, and the Babylonians will torture and kill you. Surrender? I don't dare. My own people will turn against me. You should be more than concerned that God has turned against you. Zedekiah is unhappy with the answer. He keeps Jeremiah under the house arrest. The siege goes on, but after 30 more months, Jerusalem falls, which will be our next story, the fall of Jerusalem. All because of the arrogance of the king. God had him living, maybe not perfect conditions, but they had food, they had the supplies they needed. He was still king, and everything was still very normal. Yeah, they weren't quite free. They were, at the will of the Babylonians, but that was what God had chose. He chose them. And then he tries to turn against them, which was turning against God. And in that, Jeremiah will try to warn him, and no matter how much he threw him in prison or tried to ignore him or whatever it may have been, it still was God's truth. It still, was to come to be. And then that, here we are. And he tells him, it will burn, and it has. It's Jerusalem will fall. In the next story, all because of his arrogance, all because he didn't want to pay a little extra money. He didn't want to listen to tell him, to what God told him to do. Every king that we've seen has, fallen from God and try to do things his way, which always ends up, turning out for something horrible to come, whether, and just every time. God has a punishment for everything. So, that's why we've seen it, Jerusalem, fall so much, and especially now. So we'll see what happens next. And as always, take it easy and God bless.